Καλό μεσημέρι, καλό απόγευμα μάλλον. Λέγομαι Νίκος Βέτας, είμαι καθηγητής στο Οικονομικό Πανεπιστήμιο της Αθήνας και Γενικός Διευθυντής στο ΙΟΒΕ. Και με την δεύτερη ιδιότητα θα ήθελα να σας καλωσορίσω όλους σε αυτή τη συζήτηση για θέματα χρηματοδότησης και ιδιωτικού χρέους στην ελληνική οικονομία, που αναμένω ότι θα είναι όχι μόνο ενδιαφέρουσα, αλλά και σημαντική εν ώψη της επόμενης μέρας.
I think that is going to be very interesting. We have the joy and the honor to have with us the Deputy Minister of Development and Investments, Mr. Tsakiris, the Governor of the Bank of Greece, Mr. Stournaras, the Governor of the Independent Authority for Public Revenue, Mr. Pitsilis, and the Chief Executive Officers from two of the four bigger banks in Greece, Mr. Karavias from Eurobank and Mr. Milonas from the National Bank of Greece. This conversation is co-organized with the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung institution, and we'd like to thank them also for their participation and their help. Now, the subject we're going to discuss is very important, so I don't want to waste any more time in introductions. We have agreed with my fellow colleagues here to give you 5 initial points by each of us regarding one specific question, one specific subject each. I'm going to start with Mr. Stournaras, and I would like his opinion on the capabilities of the banking system to fund the economy in the later day, and under which terms, which conditions. Later on, I'm going to talk with Mr. Karavias, and I'm going to ask his opinion on how the management of red loans is moving forward and what can be done and how does this influence the remaining of the economy. Following that, we're going to discuss what's going to happen regarding the new debt code that has recently been voted. And I'm going to ask for Mr. Milonas for his opinion regarding that. Then we're going to discuss another important subject that has to do with small and medium businesses and how do they serve their taxes in this deepening financial crisis. Mr. Pitsilis will be the one to comment on that, and we will finish, last but not least, as they say, with Mr. Tsakiris, who will be able to give us his opinion on funding through programs that need to be additional in order to support the banking system in this framework. The Hellenic economy, we all know that it's gonna fall by about 10% this year. But of course, this will happen all over the planet, all over the world. And the great questions are 2. Number 1 is what kind of opportunities we can see in the future and under which terms and circumstances can we support a stronger development in the long term. So let's begin with the CEO of the National Bank of Greece, Mr. Milonas. who's going to answer the question, are Greek banks capable of supporting this development? And what do we expect from that? What can be done? Good afternoon. It is my pleasure, it is my honor to be here with you today. So the pandemic is above all right now, and tomorrow will be different. The digitization is already a part of our lives, and it affects non-symmetrically all sectors of the economy. Greece had a service economy, let's say, so it has been heavily hurt. But there are other economies, other countries that have been hurt more. It has been proven that, okay, we're a bit worse than the average, but not in extreme bad conditions. The pandemic happened right after the 10-year financial crisis that we had. It was a very negative element for banks because it was just as we were beginning to show progress and development. And banks, as you know, it's the defense before last of the economy. The last defense is the public sector. Now, the goal that this government has in the pandemic and the European institutions, such as the European Bank or the European Commission, is to find measures, common measures, and thankfully it has been decided to vote for bridge, let's say, measures in order to keep all the businesses alive that were viable before the pandemic, at least, and in order to protect the economy. The positive news is that there are available funds. Logistics is the greatest challenge in order to proceed with the vaccination of the population. Now, regarding banks, I would say the following. The Hellenic economy is bank-central, let's say. Let's say that we need 100 points of funding for Greece, for Europe, for the US. Out of those 100 points, in the US, half of them, almost 50%, can be found through capital markets, and the other half from banks. In Europe, 75% is from banks and 25% is from capital markets. And in Greece, 95% can be found from banks and only 5% from capital markets. So Greece is a bank-central country, and banks play a very important role in the funding and financial development. Now, the Hellenic banking system, even before the economic crisis, has been facing a lot of challenges, despite the huge progress that has been achieved through the financial crisis and just a bit before the pandemic. And the great problem, as we all know, are the non-serviceable loans. Let me remind you that in March 2016, it was the peak, and we almost had 106 billion of non-serviceable loans. And right now it's 59 billion in September 2020. This is 36% against 2.9%, which is in the Eurozone. So the greatest challenge for us is to achieve the average of the Eurozone. Now, the capital sufficiency index is 16%. It is high enough, but of course it will be negatively affected, first of all, because of the IFRS 9, and second of all, because of the cost of materialization of the strategic fallout of non-serviceable loans. And as we know, all those capitals change all the time because of taxation reasons, almost 55% of the total of the capitals. And fourth, the high volume of non-serviceable loans, like we said before, and the credit danger that exists because of that, which is almost 190 base points. And also the new problem are the new non-serviceable loans that will be born after the pandemic. As you know, almost 25 billion worth of loans is in moratoria, under moratoria right now. We do not have any visibility on what's going to happen tomorrow. And we have an estimate, an approximate estimate based on our researches that show that about 8 to 10 billion will be the new non-serviceable loans to be added. Also, the banks, like I said before, need to play an important role in the Greek economy. We need to seize this opportunity and change this crisis, turn this crisis into an opportunity. And why can we do that? Because, first of all, the European Union, because of this pandemic, is behaving in a completely different way than what it was going on up until today. There is a common monetary action and a common fiscal action. The European Central Bank follows a new and aggressive policy. And of course, also we have the famous NGEU vehicle, which has a total value of 750 billion euros for the entire European Union and almost 32 billion for Greece. So in the following years, through this vehicle, almost 72 billion euros will come to Greece. And in combination with the policies of the European Central Bank, and in my estimation, it's going to be at least 2023, because the situation will continue for the following decade, in my estimation at least. So we're going to be able to develop one goal of 3.5% in the next decade is not something irrational. It is within our limits. But in order to do that, to achieve that, we need to follow an economic policy based on reformations. So far, and through this crisis, the banks have, and despite the fact that their fluidity is something that we've never seen, I have calculated that the increase of fluidity is almost 40 billions. And out of this liquidity, a small portion has been directed to the private sector. A greater portion has been given to big private businesses. But the greatest part has been given to small, medium businesses. And households. Households, not so much. And in total, in the private sector, we are almost above zero. So this entire liquidity has not been directed in the private sector. It has been directed towards bonds, deposits in the Bank of Greece, and we have a huge reduction in loans. Is this bad? No. It has been very helpful for the banks because the liquidity that we have from the European Central Bank is negative, and it has improved their results very much. But the most important thing is to help even more towards the productive sector of the economy, mostly because of this bank central direction that the Hellenic economy has. And how can we achieve that? With only one way: by solving non-serviceable loans. And second, by reducing the taxes. And in my opinion, in the opinion of the Hellenic Bank, one is Hercules, which is already operational. Second, an asset management company needed for us. As you know, the Bank of Greece has been working a project like this for many months, and it has been accepted by the SSM in order to turn it into a European network of asset management companies. It has been accepted also by the European Commission, and we have a great opportunity right now. And in my mind, we cannot be left outside this European network of asset management companies. If something like this happens, it's going to be negative, of course. But the banks will improve and the turnover of the banks will be even higher. So they will be able to play their role better as the basic funding of the Hellenic economy in this developmental schedule that we want to create. So the solution of non-serviceable loan, is it the only solution? Of course not. Let me remind you that a few days before, a new law against debt has been voted. It gives a second chance to businesses that have problems, have financial problems. It gives some flexibility to those businesses and maybe even debt reformation.
Second, digitization is about to take place in our lives, and innovation is going to be implemented. Banks are going to have very much competition, and many challenge banks will be really challenging them. They will not have the mix of the required loans, and therefore the Bank of Greece will be an assistant with the combo of innovation that it has made, and we are going further with more measures. We also have a regular sandbox when we can have some experiments done in the financial area. Third, and an example we've had a few days ago with the Eurogroup, and yesterday the European Commission made a relevant announcement. There are many developments at the area of Eurozone in order to dissolve different crises, one of them being the pandemic. Needless to repeat the announcement of the European Commission, but as it can be seen, there is a European presence, part of which we have to be as well. But first and foremost, all balances of Greek banks have to be clear in order for them to be the basic finances of the Greek economy. I hope I haven't taken more of the time that was allowed for me. Thank you very much, Mr. Stonaras. I believe that you have highlighted a couple of points on which the next speakers, Mr. Karavias and Mr. Milonas, will have something to add. And also regarding non-serviceable loans and the bankruptcy law and non-performing loans. Also regarding the checks and balances of each and every bank. In my turn, I would like us to keep a question towards the end of this meeting, because you described the European framework. This framework is far more favorable than it was during the previous crisis, on the one hand. On the other hand, it has an expiry date as well. So how shall we be able to timely be prepared in terms of the Greek economy when unavoidably there should be a reverse of these measures? And how is this possible to be done? But let's leave this to the back of our heads towards the end of our discussion. Mr. Karavias, do we do what we have to do for the non-performing loans? How do you feel about what you heard? What do you do in your own bank, and how crucial of a factor could that be? And how could we have even more liquidity in the Hellenic economy? Thank you very much, Mr. Vetas. And of course, I will agree with the manager of the Bank of Greece, Mr. Stornaras. Hellenic banks are dealing with two basic challenges for 2021. One having to do with boosting the economy and utilization of the European resources and funds. The second one has to do with the heritage of the crisis, the non-performing loans, which despite the decrease are way behind the European average. And of course, the need not to add further to it yet a new generation of red loans. But how do we deal with these two challenges? I believe that banks are trying to deal with these challenges at four distinct levels. One, dealing with the consequences of the pandemic and facilitating loan takers, for those who have signed a moratorium with the bank in order to stop provisionally stop the paying out the loan. So 150,000 loans will have an easy transition in performing their loan installments. But for most loan takers, and as the European Central Bank has introduced the limit of 9 months, these loan takers, the borrowers, will have to start repaying. So there will be a short-term phased recovery. And I believe that we also, the other side, will be able to understand that we are not with endless resources. So since there is the necessary fiscal space and the necessary measures from the part of the state with the bridge program and perhaps with several other categories of borrowers, such as businesses. Another level of action will be coordination regarding the non-performing loans. Here I would like to say that we have seen an accelerating decrease of non-performing loans in the balances of banks. This is a cycle that started from our bank, Eurobank. I believe that we have concluded a program of drastic decrease of non-performing loans. We have an index which is below 15%, and we aspire that by 2022, the latest, we will have turned this index to single-digit 1. We believe that the rest of the banks are doing likewise, and the respective program of the NGB, which Mr. Milanas will talk to us about, is also under progress. But why is it important to get to a single-digit non-performing loan index? Because also our solvency will go through such an index that must not be exceeding 9. It should be somewhere between 5 and 9. In this effort by the banks, Hercules has been tremendous assisting tool, because it has helped a lot. It has minimized any bad consequences. Let me reiterate here what I have said many times before. The problem is so complex and so big that we need any weapon that we can get hold of. And within this framework, also Hercules #2 is very welcome. And I believe that the bad bank program has also been very successful. Also, yesterday's related comment is known by everyone. Third point has to do with the restoration of lending to businesses. I believe that in 2020, really, the banking system has shown that it can finance businesses that really need it. On the basis of the data included in the latest European Commission report, lending was higher than mid-2009. It amounted to 8.9%. It also covered SMEs, and within the framework of the programs of the Hellenic Development Bank, those programs that have matured have a percentage over 90%. We financed 25,000 businesses, the vast majority of which were SMEs. Fourth level of action has to do with putting together around the banking system a mechanism in order to provide with the loans of the recovery fund. The government is known to have decided to provide with the 13 billion of the recovery fund to private investments in the private sector on one condition, that these investments will have secured banking lending. So we're talking about a structuring of these investments that will include at least 20% equities, about 40% banking loans, and this will be exactly the precondition in order to pay out the other 40% that will be the funding from the recovery fund. So banks know how to work, and they're ready to help the businesses how to use the money from the recovery fund. Besides, banks are the backers of all works such as Elliniko project, the island interconnection with the grid, and all the other programs that will change the economic footprint of the country. So summing up and closing with this, I believe that 2020 has proven that the banking system is able to absorb shocks and fund the economy, and it will continue to do so insofar as the pandemic issue evolves in the positive territory. Thank you very much, Mr. Karavias. Before we get to Mr. Milanas, let me write a question aside, which we will have to come back to, and a point in which there was not complete unanimity with you and Mr. Karavias, and also for us that are observers of the economy. A very interesting question: to what degree this new financing that we all agree is needed and the new investments are confined obstacles in current capital structure of banks, or alternatively, is this not such a big problem compared to the fact that no projects that will come to be co-financed are there, which will be at the desired level? Banks may have said, yes, that whatever deserves to be financed will be financed. Or could it be that we should change something in order to have more financing? Let's leave this aside for the moment, and we'll get back to it. Mr. Milanas, also on the issue of bankruptcy law, we referred to non-performing loans as a problem of the past. I have heard, however, that many people say that unless we're very, very cautious, this may come back as a problem again. Thank you very much, Nico.
Thank you for the invitation. And the two previous speakers talked about macroeconomy and national subjects, and your question is a bit more limited, let's say, but important, as you said. So without an institutionary framework that works, we cannot diminish the non-performing loans. And one of the most important things of this framework is for the bankruptcy law to be working, to be functional. And I know that the Nomos Katselli, the OCW, I know that it has created a lot of problems for us. I can give you an entire list of laws and legislations that have been unsuccessful. So this effort will be applauded as needed, of course, as something needed. We need a bankruptcy law because if there are no viable businesses, the only solution is bankruptcy. You know, a fair solution for private individuals, for businesses, in order to solve their problems, to solve the things that cannot be solved otherwise. So what we call bankruptcy law will be even more developed with this new law. The bankruptcy law will be combined with pre-bankruptcy derivatives, and it's going to be a new opportunity for the businesses. It is more urgent. It becomes urgent day by day because, you know, all banks are trying to reduce non-performing loans. They sell them, and if there's no bankruptcy, not the option of bankruptcy, nobody will buy these non-performing loans. So it gets even more important day by day because Eurogroup has set it as one of its priorities of this program. Well, it's not a program, it's a post-program, as we call it. And I would like to see this new law being implemented in the months to come. We have a law that can solve a lot of problems, but it is a law nevertheless. It has not yet been implemented. And in the past, we have passed laws, but it has been very difficult to use them because the regulatory framework of this country is a bit cumbersome for private individuals in general, generally speaking, and not just the bankruptcy laws, all laws. I have an example citing in situations like these, the Katseli law. If we had tried to implement this law in Sweden, for example, it would be an excellent law. It's excellent on paper, but it is not compatible with the regulatory framework of the country, where the courts of first instance, for example, would not be able to handle this volume of cases. Now, let's see how can we implement this complex law legislation. We have about 7 different workflows. Approval and warning to the people who owes the law, to the borrower. For him to know that he has a problem, he needs to connect to a system through the bank and the state in order for us to be able to know that he has a problem. Extrajudicial procedures. Then, regulation of installments. Regulation of trying to improve the situation. Bankruptcy procedure for small and large businesses as well. And another social measure to be able, for the company to be able to start again, to lease maybe. Almost 50 ministerial decisions are needed for this flow to work. If those ministerial decisions are not compatible with each other, we have a problem. And we cannot implement the law if we do not have those common ministerial decisions. I believe that we have made steps. Almost half of them are already being prepared, but we still have a long way to go. Those systems need to be interconnected. They need to talk to each other. Also be connected with the banks, the courts, the borrowers, the creditors. It is quite complex. This algorithm for the extrajudicial procedure has not yet been processed, has not been prepared yet, but we need to decide on a fair algorithm that will be able to share the loss, to spread the loss between the banks and the state and the borrowers. It is very important, but it's time-consuming. And let me end with a couple of notes. We need rules of the game, first of all, to know what's going to happen during this transition. What about the biddings? What about the payment culture? What do we do in this meantime? And a suggestion of mine, to focus on some priorities, decide specific priorities on this workflow to see what can be completed first, because we cannot do all the things all together. And that's all from me. Let me thank you, Mr. Milonas. After hearing you speak, I got a sense of urgency. You're right when you say that the European Commission has prioritized this subject in the framework of the Hellenic economy, of course. When Mr. Costello last week said something very clearly in this conversation that we had, and even though I shouldn't be insisting on that, I will insist, because I want to give you an extra question. Almost 50 ministerial, joint ministerial decisions, like you said, interconnected systems, the participation of the court system. All these are difficult things. Let me ask you, what if we do not do this as fast as you suggested? What's the danger for us if we do not complete all those tasks in the correct time? I said that there will be a transition period. If there is something that works with the old system, until this new legislation is activated, there will be a transition period. It would be okay. And we need to make a decision on what's going to happen during those months, because, of course, delays can happen. And we as banks, and I'm guessing that Mr. Karavias will agree with me, that the banks will support, of course, a big portion from our IT systems and our credit systems. We will offer our support. I think that it is of the utmost importance. We have services, we sell loans as well. The system needs to work, and we will support it as much as we can. The truth is that bankruptcy law must be of the greatest importance for every society. There is a typical standpoint, but there are also great difficulties that might be such as the crisis that we are living right now. Many of the tax obligations of businesses or of private individuals have been postponed for the future, and maybe others cannot even be performed. So I would like to ask Mr. Pitsillis to give us an image of the Independent Authority of Public Revenue to see what's going on, to see the image, let's say, of the Hellenic economy right now after the month of March. And one question that I do not know it's pertinent right now, but what about those delays, those payment delays? I think that it will make it even more difficult for people to pay off their loans in the future. But this is my opinion. What is your opinion? What do you think is going on?
Thank you very much, Mr. Vetas, for the opportunity for me to give, first of all, a picture of the course of public revenues so far, but also mainly in order to share with you the thoughts and concerns that we have for the day after, what keeps us up at night, that is, namely how we're going to carry on from this point onwards. And in fact, when the problem of public health due to the pandemic will be about to be alleviated. For the moment, we're quite in the eye of the storm, and we're doing very well by protecting everybody's health. And let us financially support the businesses. This is absolutely necessary. On the other hand, however, there will also be that next day, and we should also know how to deal with it. So, as the figures show, public revenues did much worse compared to the forecast. Fiscal revenues compared to the initial goal is about 16% minus, and at about 16% minus compared to last year. So we can't get away with that. Looking at the picture that we have from this year from the VAT declarations, it's not the overall, but it's the largest part of the economy. Out of 87 two-digit branches in the 11 months, we have 24 branches that are on the increase. An overall increase of about 6% plus 1.23 billion, and 63 branches, sectors that have a decrease of the order of 10%, being at 22 billion. So the aggregate is a little bit above 22 billion in outflows declared in the VAT. Similar is the picture in the income from VAT. 27% document, 27 sectors are on the increase, 60 are on the decrease. If you ask me which these sectors are, I would off the cuff tell you that all sectors connected to restoration and tourism have decreased flow, and respectively sectors having to do with pharmaceuticals, primary and secondary production, as well as IT, are on the increase as an overall. Respective is the picture in the picture of outdue payments. We managed to keep it, but it has increased. The overdues have increased, and we'll see some increase on that after November. We're talking about 105 billion, but in reality, we should be talking about the money after we deduct the non-solvables. But what can be cashed in is a little bit above 83 billion. Despite that, let me give you a little bit a view of the positive side. The new overdue continues to have a decreasing course. In 2016, in the 11 month, the new overdue being created until then was almost 11 billion euros, and this with deducting the non-taxable categories, that would be the purely taxed part, and then we dropped to 9.5 billion, then we got to almost 8 billion, in 2019 at 6.4, and this year we are at 5 billion. So despite the overall recession and difficulties, the new overdue is on the decrease, and this is very encouraging. We're lagging behind in paying out overdues, which is also inevitable within the framework of the halting of payments. About 60% of renegotiated loans, regulated loans, the overall percentage of performing loans were on the increase. From 81.6 in 2019, we went a little bit up only. We do not have a drastic change. We've had an increase of timely payout of VAT, also thanks to the measures taken, the motives, the incentives for timely paying out seem to have given fruit. And in the natural persons taxation, we're on the bright side. Only in the legal persons we've had a slight increase of overdues. The primary data that are yet to be processed is that many businesses, although going through harsh times, are still managing to pay the debts. Many taxpayers have used the favorable tax framework, and they have managed to see that the crisis is going much deeper than the 2-month period that we all imagined in the first place, and therefore realized that if one wants to survive, they should not leave much debt for the day after, because later on the situation might not be easy to upturn the next day. Also, a large amount of the installment to be returned has been used in order to pay out tax obligations. So within all this framework, I would like to share with you our concern for the next day. And to make a long story short, the next day will include businesses that come out from a really long tunnel of difficult, harsh, dire times. So by working the same, there is an accumulation of obligations hanging from April onwards. And of course, also an inevitable consequence is whether you're truly or namely suffering from this crisis. There is an effort to try and choose the most necessary obligations to pay out in order for one's survival. Now, this is to be taken into consideration by us for the next day. And allow me to say that we really have to knock on the right doors, knock on the doors of those people who could have contributed and did not do so, and we'll have to increase pressure on them, and remain supportive to businesses that were true suffered and will need indeed the time in order to get back on their feet. And I could tell you here that this kind of concern or stress is not just to Greece. In all international fora where they're currently talking about how fiscal managements handled the pandemic, there are similar concerns. Of course, digitization is the answer to many of these questions. We did use it in order to support businesses. My business support gave more than 6 billion euros to 670,000 businesses. There was end-to-end digital network with Mr. Takiris. We've had the opportunity to work very closely together in the part of state grants that we should not overcome certain financial limits. It has been a multifaceted and hard project, and we're very proud to have completed it. And a last thought on the optimistic side would be to use the recovery fund from our part in order to lead further to digitization and provide with innovative solutions, both in serving the citizen, which I believe helps compliance and fiscal responsibility a lot. Many people find it hard to comply, not because they do not want to, but because they do not know how to. So there's a lot of work to be done there in order to perform and implement this mentality change that we indeed have. And on the other hand, in our day-to-day work, control and cashing in, act in a targeted and effective way. I have the impression, thank you very much, Mr. Pitsilis, I have the impression that one of the points that we have to talk about in a next meeting is how one can tell the households and businesses that are striving to be okay towards their financial obligations and really perform well with their loans, compared to other businesses that move within the limits of legitimacy of the economy, or hope to a next wave of non-payment. I believe that this is something to be dealt with later on, but let's first of all conclude the first round with Mr. Tsakidis and see from the part of the Greek state and the financial policy, on the one hand, how we can help with the interconnection of households and businesses. On the other hand, how this can prepare us for the next day. Mr. Tsakidis, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vetas. Thank you for the invitation in this very interesting discussion with your distinguished guests. I hope that what I'm about to say is going to be a bit more optimistic regarding the liquidity of the market. And I'd like to begin by saying that, in my opinion, the Greek government as a totality has acted with a well-structured plan, and up to this moment, and within air quotes, let's say, it has been so far so good. But regarding the cash flow, the liquidity in the market, with different and additional actions, in order for more businesses to receive support, to receive the amount that they possibly need, and apart from that, to leverage the public funds that we have available. And I will begin with the part of our discussion that has to do with non-performing loans. This is an action that began at the beginning of this crisis and lasted for 5 months, and had to do, it was low-key, but I think that it was very important at the time. It pertained to the payment of 100% of the income, of the interest of business loans from March to August 2020. This was, let's say, a liquidity, a sort of cash flow for those businesses, which of course improved their cash flow, but also it kept the business within the banking system, within the limits of the banking system, of course, along with the halting of the payments of the installments of the loan that has been instituted by the banks right now. So we have two additional actions, two additional measures that in reality kept afloat a lot of businesses within the limits of the banking system. The second thing I'd like to say has to do with the liquidity issues. There were many additional subjects regarding that. by starting from the amount of money given by the government, which is something that has never happened in Greece regarding the speed and the efficiency, and the main responsible person for that is Mr. Pitsilis. This was an action which, in a very short period of time, this advance payments by the government gave liquidity to where it was needed. Small amounts of money for very small businesses. And if you imagine this type of approach, and Mr. Pitsilis can correct me if I'm wrong, an average of this advance payment to be returned is about around 10,000 euros. So about 400,000 businesses have been supported by this measure by the government. Everyone took a small amount of money. And I'm going to the second part right now, which are the fiscal tools developed by the ministry, which will be used in a next level of funding, let's say, a level that overall and until this day has given to the market to almost 6 billion euros. And we continue with the second cycle of advance payment to be returned by the government by having spent, let's say, but I don't mean spend, I mean used, by having used. When this second cycle of those programs will end, we will have reached a lending through all those programs of 8.5 billion euros towards all Greek businesses. And we are expecting over 30,000 businesses to receive loans through this fashion. And only by using 3.5 billion euros. So with 3.5 billion euros, we managed to mobilize 8.5 billion euros of loans. These 3.5 billion euros that we used are not just being given away freely, they're not being spent, but they are being used. And the amount of those guarantees that is not used eventually, the loans that will not be utilized, they come back. They come back to the country because they are part of NSRF support money, let's say. So let's say that the state has even more funds available than the ones used so far. But I would like to underline something that has to do with the structure of the Greek business world, of a typical Greek business. In every European country, we say that small and medium businesses are the backbone of the economy. And of course, this is the reality. But in Greece, there is a particularity because we have a very specific form of market. We have 830,000 businesses in Greece, business VAT accounts. 810,000 of them have to do with very small businesses, according to the classification of the European Committee, from 0 to 10 people, to 10 employees. 810,000 very small businesses. If all those businesses are divided by the number of employees, we have an average of employees of 1.7 people. This information come from 2018, I'm guessing, but I don't think that they have changed a lot until this day. So we're talking about 90%, more or less, of Greek businesses are companies that only occupy one person or even two persons. If we put those things aside with the average of the advance pay to be returned by the government and balance it with the loans that are less than 100,000 euros and calculate the 200,000 euros loans, I think that we have covered and we keep on covering. I'm not going to say the totality of all businesses, but a very, very high percentage of the Greek businesses have been covered with those measures. So this is the situation as we have it right now. I would like to note that, like I said at the beginning, that all those measures and actions have been implemented, have been made reality for the Hellenic public sector at light speed. Imagine any other financial help from international support systems needs months to be implemented. We managed to do it in a couple of months via the Bank of Greece. Those last 8 years, the Hellenic Bank, the National Bank of Greece has now up to 30,000 loans within these last few months. It is a huge effort that has been made regarding the funds, regarding the work, regarding the resources in order to make this framework, this governmental framework of immediate liquidity for the market. The banks have, of course, helped this procedure because we, in our part, gave a guarantee for this liquidity. We took a large chunk of the risk, of course. But right now, I think that we're at a point, and after the vaccination, I hope, that the market will start opening up again, and this pandemic crisis, this sanitary and health crisis will start diminishing, so the markets will improve. We, as the Hellenic government, and it has already been communicated by Mr. Staikouras, the Minister of Investments, we will continue to offer this liquidity with the advance pay to be returned by the government, all these fiscal tools that we have in our hands, because we saw that they are usable quickly, they serve their purpose, and also they protect the banks that offer this liquidity, at least up to a point, because at first we do not have 100% guarantee, but it's about 35% in total. This leveraging that we have in order for the system to work, and I'm hoping that we will come out alive from this crisis. Thank you, Mr. Tsakiris. Now let's move to a discussion, a small discussion between us. We have about half an hour available, and I'd like to tell you, to tell the people that are watching us, can use the chat in our channel. If they have any question to share with us, any comment, I will do this question to my colleagues here. And of course, I would like to thank all of you for the clarity with which you described those problems that you are facing. We are in the midst of a deep crisis. And I'm guessing that we will be able to surmount these problems. But I want to visualize the solutions that you suggested. Can you please help me to see? I don't know if I'm making a mistake or not, but the main scenario that we have available in accordance to what we are facing is that by the end of the spring, things will be better health-wise. But I don't think that this will be enough for us to have a normal tourist period. I don't know if the budget is realistic regarding the tourist business, the expenses and the income. But we are facing a summer with businesses and households that have postponed their tax obligations. There are a lot of tools that will be used in a macro or micro level in our country. And reasonably, the following year that starts in a few days will be better than the year that we passed. But are those things enough for the Greek economy to respond and move forward? You talked a lot about the small size of the businesses. Most of them are private businesses of private individuals, and we explained that the funding is not yet finished. And I'm wondering, can we be optimistic that after the summertime, the Hellenic economy will start moving forward, and not just temporarily, but in order finally to achieve success? I don't know who wants to start. This question is quite general. Mr. Vetas, allow me to start, because first of all, I'm going to try to answer the questions that you said. You asked before whether this capital structure is the thing that stops the funding of the economy, that hinders it. Yes, of course, this capital structure is an issue, mostly for businesses. If we take a look at the list of all the applications that we had during the last months for funding, we received requests for funding from businesses that had great loans, that had negative equities. And also we received applications for funding from businesses that already had non-performing loans. So we had to fund those 25,000-30,000 businesses, as the minister said, mostly by thinking that we need to fund businesses that will be viable in the future as well, that will be able to keep their employees, to keep working places as well.
There's also another aspect that was very well described by the minister, and you have also described it in your own report with Mr. Psaris, that there's an issue of scale in business entrepreneurship. So we have very, very many very small, tiny little businesses. So in order to see things differently, we will have to make a scale differentiation. Another point that can also be seen in the NSRFs throughout time, there are not enough investment projects that can absorb the capitals available. And in about 2021, and whether we should be optimistic or not, the answer lies to a large degree on whether we will be able to create enough investment plans and projects that will be able to absorb the large amount of European capitals that are available for our country. Concluding, I would like to say that banks really want, and there is strong competition between us in financing those projects, and we will help all businesses to put together business plans in order to be able to absorb the 30 billion of development fund. Mr. Karavias, thank you very much. Would anyone else like to take the floor? Mr. Vetas, if you allow me, to the question you asked me in the end of my speech, what will happen with the end of the measures. This is an issue not only for Greece, but also for the totality of Europe. That is to say, the risk of having a cliff effect. If all of a sudden the measures go away, so how shall we keep the businesses that before crisis were viable? And there is a question here of a smooth transition from the measures before the pandemic to the next day. The measures measures that both concern the states and Greece, which let me point out that yesterday I saw a table from at the ECB that for the measures that have to do with fiscal issues, Greece has had the most, followed only by Italy. From the point of guarantees, we're not as high as Germany, because, and this is self-understood, because before the crisis, Germany had 60% of debt of the GDP. We were somewhere at 180%. So I believe that Greece has done the maximum that it can could have done with these measures, as described by Mr. Pitsilis and Mr. Tsadikiri. So when the issue of transition is important, we have to be ready to deal with it. We may have a wave of non-performing loans when these bridges and of the state end. Now, regarding to my disagreement with Mr. Karavias, I know it's a European phenomenon, the fact that due to the crisis, the banks hesitate to borrow money because they fear the cliff effect. But at least from the 9-month period data that I have in front of me, I can see that the balance of the 4 systemic banks was increased by 24 billion. This was the clear increase of liquidity. Now, in the assets part, the loans are 144, 145 million euros. The rest is what I said earlier. Placements at the central bank and bonds of the Hellenic state. Now, in terms of gross flow, we've had an increase. Yes, the overall funding of the private sector moves at 2.5% in October per year, when a few months ago it was negative. So as Mr. Karavias said, we have a positive effect, but let me reiterate, the banks estimate the risk. The structure of Greek businesses is the one that we know. Vast majority are very small SMEs. Largest part of co-funding was given to very large businesses, and let me reiterate, things would have been easier for funding, and I do not mean the funding performed by the state. I'm not talking about the advance pay to be returned. I'm only talking about the bank funding. Of course, the next day includes the great challenge of absorbing these 13 billion to be given to loans by the average of development. This is where banks have the opportunity to co-finance these projects. But this is going to be the great challenge for the next years. We either win this opportunity or we go back to a period of financial instability. If we all follow the same financial policy and we go to a 3.4 or 5% or 4% development rate, then we can do it.
Before we continue with the next speaker, I'd like to combine the notes of the 2 previous speakers, and please allow me to add another question, because I will totally agree with Mr. Karavias that before we start talking about loans, we should take into consideration that our country has a huge problem with the same capitals of businesses. this has to do with the way this capital market in Greece has not developed adequately. And also, there's a huge problem with the insurance policies in the country and the savings of households. Mr. Stournaras at first, when he started his speech, said that this capital market does not work a lot in Greece. And there's a misunderstanding, let's say, that bank loans, bank lending, and the increase of equity is competitive. It's not competitive. It goes hand in hand with each other. And this is sort of like a vicious circle. So how can we advance quickly, because we don't have a lot of time, how can we advance the capitals of small businesses in order for them to be able to absorb this liquidity that will come later on in the economy tomorrow? Let's just have this question in the back of our heads. I don't know if... yes, I'd like to follow the thread by the two previous speakers. You asked whether the funding is a problem of offer or demand. And I think that many businesses in Greece are not bankable. They are small business, they have small capitals, etc. Second thing is that if we take a look at the GDP, the investments are very low, about 10%, even less, which means that when we talk about clean investments, it's close to zero. We cannot have development without investments, and the banks mostly fund those types of businesses. That's the model. Businesses invest and the banks fund. Well, I don't think that investments do not occur because they cannot find funding. I'm absolutely sure about that. But there are no investments. And why is that happening? Let's go back to something that is more complicated. It is also the regulatory framework. Businesses prefer to be small to avoid labor laws, to skim a bit of the taxes. It is an old model. We need a regulatory framework to stop that. Otherwise, we will remain the same. So corporate laws do not allow for a business to be operational with negative capitals, but it happens. It happens. A family business wants to remain a family business because the wallet, let's say, of the company, of the family business and the family is the same. I'm not saying something new, but we need a regulatory framework to set rules that will be respected and followed. Mr. Vetas, let me put some pressure on you, Mr. Tsakiris, please allow me. I would like to put pressure on Mr. Milonas because he started poking the wound right now. This regulatory framework, is it a matter of respect? And what about accountability? Because I agree that it's very complex, of course, but we'll also agree that we need things to change. Otherwise, as Mr. Stournaras said, we won't have time, we won't make it. Yes, the justice system for me is something very important. And it's slow, it's not wrong. I'm not saying that the decisions made are wrong, but if it takes 10 years for a decision to be made, I don't know. We have good judges in Greece, but it is slow. Our system is slow. I saw Mr. Tsakiris raising his hand. Thank you. Just one note from me. I told you before, and it's quite interesting for me to continue on what I said before, that we have 830,000 businesses. I'm reading the numbers right now. Out of those 830,000 businesses, only 375 are big businesses that have more than 200 employees. Only 2,350 are medium. Imagine that. We have 830,000 businesses. We're talking about small, medium, and only 2,350 of them are medium. 19,000 small businesses, and all the remaining are very small businesses. So the structure of the market is like that. I'd like to tell you that we have been planning, along with it has been shown in the Pissaridis report as well, we are designing for incentives in order for businesses to grow as much as they can, at least. So this is a policy, this is a policy direction that we've been having so far. And I would like to note another thing. Of course, this financial crisis and this health crisis that we are facing right now affects the balances of all businesses. So it is urgent for us to give them measures that will support the capital of the businesses. We, as a state, we don't have a lot of leeway to interfere over there, but regarding the business capitals, we have started a lot of programs in order to co-fund, along with private individuals, the capitals of business risks or business participation, as we call them, venture capitals and private equity, as we call them in English. And of course, the needs are dire, and also we don't have a lot of time. We need time in order to balance this relationship between borrowing and capitals of the companies. I think that it's not just a matter of size of the business, but also it's the rules that they operate under. Of course, we need to support the businesses and the employees and their employees as well, and make them a bit more competitive in an international scale. It's a matter of productivity. But also, I'd like to connect a word said by Mr. Milonas in relation to the non-incentives. Well, incentives, of course, should be promoted, but also it's a counter incentive for a business to be small, because it has to be small in order to just play right next to the limit of the rules. And especially in this economy where the wallet, let's say, the money of the business and the family business and the household is the same, they keep funding each other, the household and the family business. Of course, you're not responsible for taxing policies, but you are responsible for their implementation. Do you think that it is difficult? It causes difficulties, the fact that the household and the family business have the same money, the same register? And how can we stop this exchange of money in order for us to stop supporting this form of atypical economy, in order to break this vicious circle?
Answering in part to your previous question, also that I'm institutionally optimistic. Looking at the forecast, we ought as management to be optimistic in order to be able to implement the projects that are required by the country. And coming from a meeting earlier regarding the recovery fund, something that allows greater optimism has to do with the digitization of the independent authority of public revenues. And the improvement of our efficiency helps the improvement of quality of fiscal policy. Evidently, we only implement that, we do not trace it, but the quality of one, of course, affects the other, meaning that the best the fiscal management of a state, the more are the tools included to fiscal policy. So we need to be on the optimistic side. I can also tell you on the basis of the data that I am referring to, I have specific reasons not to be that pessimistic, because despite the difficulties, taxpayers, although suffering, have been coping with their obligations. The advance pay to be returned has worked, and then incentives as well. Now, fragmentation, the issue of fragmentation of the Greek economy, and the fact that we very much work with individual businesses, we have a scale difference with the rest of the European Union, following Italy. This is due to many reasons. So to a large degree, it's also an issue, a matter of culture. We want to have we want the wallet to be our own wallet, and it's hard to tell between the individual and the corporate wallet. But in any case, we do not want to collaborate. We fear collaboration. Delays in justice does play a role, justice being served, because collaborations are always easy. I tell you this in my capacity as a lawyer. It's always easy to shake hands and signing up an agreement. The hard part comes when there is a disagreement. This is where we have some weaknesses. Much is needed. We see that, unfortunately, the smaller a business, the harder it is for it to comply. We do not think that the reason why the informal or small size is chosen in order to tax evade. No, that's not the reason. But this possibility is largely accepted, though, meaning that in this scheme, there's higher flexibility. From our part, the answer is better monitoring the market. This is where my data does have value, electronic pricing, and it has to do with the totality of the economy, not just small businesses. It regularizes the totality of the economy as a project, but it's not the only one. The minister said that there is indeed a discussion about how we can provide with incentives to form larger units, larger businesses. I would think of talking more to young generation about the value of specialization and collaboration in work. Please allow me, Mr. Clavius, to take the floor and answer to a basic question that you asked in the end, for instance, about tourism. Indeed, tourism is a large part of our income. At least in the Bank of Greece, where we make the forecast for tomorrow, where we have said that on the base scenario, we'll have a 2%. We do not suppose that 2021 will get back to the volume of 2019. This is where we're going to be in 2013 and 2023. We'll be at the 40% of it. Another basic point is that consumption, which, as you know, is the largest part of GDP, private consuming, actually, will increase by 4.2%, and it will do so because the available income will increase, but the saving will be on the decrease. So I believe that it's quite a realistic forecast regarding tourism. But also in general, about up to 4.2% is quite a realistic scenario, quite a realistic percentage, insofar as we do not have any major really bad surprise, but no one knows about that. But the base scenario, also adopted by the European Union, is looking at a 4 up to 4.2% on the basis of the data that we have until this point. Unless there is no other further comment, because I do not want to take up any more of your time. I know that you all have a very heavy schedule. Let's conclude with two rounds of very quick questions. First, I would like to give you the opportunity to express your opinion regarding the recovery fund by asking a double question to each and every one of you. One, can you tell me in one single phrase, in the sector of your own competence or direct interest, what is the one thing that you would like the recovery fund to do? What should we be particularly careful about? And let me combine it with a second question, because time is running out. I understand that by the end of spring, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Minister, we will have to specialize everything and be ready before the summit. But the recovery fund will be able to deal with the private fund. So in order for the businesses to be ready and know how they will invest, the rules regarding the private sector will have to be quite clear quite early. So a first round for the recovery fund is, what should we take particularly be careful about? How are we going to have the highest effectiveness or absorbency? I don't know who would like to start. Mr. Tsakiris, as representative of financial policy, maybe? Look, first of all, I cannot answer to the first leg of the question. What is the one I would like most of everything else? But the recovery fund, along with the next NSRF that coincide, and this is why the overall amount of funding goes up so high. The exercises that we have been doing all these months have shown us, first of all, and also in the beginning, I've had some doubts whether we'll manage to absorb it, whether the projects are enough within these months. And in particular, Mr. Skilakakis' team that did all these exercises so that we would be at the final solution, the final list, the short list of the projects to be submitted. I would like to reassure you that there was a super engagement. All the projects that we kept were the fund twice the money. We held the most mature, and I would like to reaffirm that we're sure that the resources are going to be absorbed exactly as in its detail the framework will be defining. And as a technocrat, I've had certain fears in the beginning, I admit, but now I do not have any more, also including the new NSRF, next to which it's going to be working. One remark, yes, the issue of how private investigators and businesses will be prepared. Could we have a faster answer to where we should expect it? Because we have seen, look, let us not forget that the Recovery Fund is a European tool. We do not control how or the degree or the rate that certain things are explained and clarified. It's the European Commission. And evidently, also we have certain questions that we would have wanted to answer to earlier in order to be best prepared, but waiting little by little, the landscape is going to become clearer. It's not an easy exercise, including many stakeholders. And day by day, more and more questions are answered, to which we answer to the market, to the so-called stakeholders in our turn. So the central thought regarding the Recovery Fund by all gentlemen, if I can have the floor, answering to the question what we want, because there is a whole sector of projects titled digitization of Independent Authority of Public Revenues that has 16 to 17 sub-projects. There's no point enumerating them. Just keep the title, digitization. I will say, however, that for us, it is both an occasion, a happy occasion, that gave us the opportunity to think outside the box more courageously, things that we may have wanted all this time that we were not sure we could plan without knowing whether we would have the money or the time to do it. So it's been a great accelerator, but also a challenge, so that it will be part not only of the strategic planning, because this is easy to say, but also to include in the operational strategic planning. Many of these projects with their technical maturing have been at least 2 to 3 years old for us. They're all huge projects, and we also have a part technical maturity, which by itself is to be assigned. All this should enter the operational planning and engage time from our time, so that we will all know that we have to do this. Not just saying, oh yes, it's something to be done, and let us do the trivia and then leave it for the end. No, it has to be priority number one. This is what offers to its operational part. It is an engagement by all of us that these have to be done. We have to create space and time in order to do this. If you allow me, and if I'm not distorting your thought, digitization per se does not do anything. We need to have digitization with a change of management and monitoring rules. Yes, of course, it's one of the greatest things to ask for. And unfortunately, revisiting the first generation of digitization of services that took place in 2013, in several cases, digitization was just a reiteration of the paper bureaucracy, only in a digital form. This is why I brought it forward. The rest of our speakers, just one main thought regarding the Recovery Fund. May I? First of all, there are investments from the European Commission, green economy, green development, leave carbon and move towards the RES, and large percentage should go to the digitization, as mentioned by the previous colleagues and a part in research, innovation, and education and training. Regarding digitization, yeah, this is very beneficial to us. If we're not the last ones, we're the ones before last in digitization. So we have to draw up plans and have 5G technology. How fast can we do that? Which businesses are going to do that? We should have businesses that we should be maximizing the domestic value. We need businesses that have that are good to invest to, as the banks say, and they should have plans not only for themselves but also for small and medium enterprises that are going to act as their procurement businesses. We have to increase exports and having procurements from the domestic market, we managed to limit exports, limit imports. So large private businesses should put up plans in order to get to digitization.
How can we move to alternate resources, such as hydrogen, for example? Who's going to do that? Well, I'm not just talking about digitization or energy. I'm talking about the generalized investment plan that will boost productivity in order for us to be able to be competitive in the international markets for imports and exports. Yes, but digitization is a huge part because we are very behind. We are very behind and we can move forward. Mr. Karavias or Mr. Milonas, about the recovery fund? Yes, would you like to start? Yes, let me start by repeating that the private sector should move fast by submitting the investment plans to absorb the funds from the development fund. We have 13 billion of loans that will be directed specifically to investment plans in the private sector. So we need investment plans that come from private businesses of about 30 billion, which is a huge number. And in order for us to move forward fastly, we need to know the terms of this investment, of this funding that will come, the interest rate, the duration, etc. And we need also for the government to specialize what are those projects that could be that could take part in this funding, because green investments are definitely some of the most that we need, and also we also need chapters for mergers of businesses and funding and investments. So we need some sort of specialization in order to do that along with our clients and form this type of investment plans. I will continue his train of thought. You asked, how can we plan something that will not lead us to waste our money? And here, as an economist, I'm saying that private investors should take some risks. They need to have their skin in the game, to use their own capitals. We, as the banking sector, will be able to evaluate their plans. The public sector does not need to do that. We, as banks, know if something is viable or not, and only then those investments will be good and productive. I'm talking about the implementation of this process now. The investor needs to risk his own capitals. It's not just a free option. And then the banks will evaluate this project to see if it's viable or not. And one last round with just one question, a general question, since we are approaching the end. And let me try, in a less technocratic way, on one hand, we see a huge opportunity because the world economy is expected to have a huge leap forward, and also because Europe has a fail-safe, let's say, index for this economy. And this is the positive thing. The negative thing is because we have an economy that is under huge pressure after the 10 years of the financial crisis that we faced. I'm not sure that many of the things that we discussed for the need of gradual change is something understood by everyone. And this is a problematic, let's say, that I have. When do you think that the economy will turn back to normality? Sometimes this question scares me because, can you tell me, of course, if you have a notion of that? But the question is, do we need to go back to normality, to the previous normality? Minister. I think that this shock is an external shock for the entire world economy. It's huge. Something like that hasn't been seen in several generations. And my personal opinion is that we will wake up after the pandemic in a different reality. Right now, we are going through this period of violent adaptation towards this new reality. But I'm positive, I'm optimistic that at least the Hellenic economy will do well. It's a fact that when Greeks are being pressured, they do things better at the last moment. And I'm sure that we will wake up one day in this new normality, this new reality, stronger and with even more possibilities to be riding the wave. Because let's not forget that everyone, the world economy, will start from the same starting point, because the shock is the same for all of us. Thank you. Let me answer this question. Of course, not everybody understands what we are saying. Do not accept them. Everybody has their own opinion. But I think that it is common sense that the majority of people will accept and receive what we just said. We need to go back to normality, of course. This social distancing has huge impacts both on the financial sector and on the society. And ever since the vaccine is starting to appear, I'm guessing that in 2021, some type of normality will resurface. Of course, there are people who, based on this pandemic, are afraid. A few months ago, Economist, the magazine, said, what next? What's going to be the next big problem? What about a comet? If we start thinking like that, we won't be able to move forward because of our fear. And Greeks, you know, have a weird sense of humor. We have different anecdotes saying that maybe we will face a new pandemic in a couple of years and we will be looking back fondly to the days of the quarantine. Yes, yes, we need to hear a joke. Yes, there are very nice, funny jokes online. But anyway, we need to face this situation with a positive attitude, some stamina. And at least this makes me optimistic. This gives me a sense of optimism that we will go back to normal, not without such a great, huge cost, because there is a silver lining everywhere. And Europe right now has learned to move with common actions. This is what we said for many years. Maybe this pandemic has made Europe a true union. It's a step forward, it's a step towards the right direction. And I'm hoping that this 850 billion is a permanent tool, a permanent fiscal tool in the heart of the European community. And I hope that it will be used anytime there's a crisis. Now, for the time being, I'm just repeating what Mr. Tsakiri said, that it is a restart of our economy. So we need to push the pedal and go faster. And Mr. Sturnara said there is a strong European network. We're a very small economy, but we have a huge backyard, which is the huge European economy, the greatest market in the planet. I have another optimistic thing to say. Yes, of course, we need optimism. I believe that this crisis, not the pandemic crisis, the previous crisis, the financial that we had, has built some very dynamic companies. We have small companies and we also have some dynamic companies. Companies with an outgoing character have increased. This financial crisis really cleared the area. So I'm guessing that we are stronger right now as an economy, number one. This is number one. And number two, I think that this crisis has helped the Greek society to know what it wants against many other European social situations, where still popularism and people who do not want to take austere measures. Greece has been taking austere measures for 10 years now, and I don't think it would be able to do that in Spain or in Italy, because I think that we have passed this difficult social barrier and we take a different look at the future. We do not have these distinctions that we used to have in the past, and this is quite optimistic. So another third optimistic thing. Mr. Pitsilis or Mr. Karavias, do they have any pessimistic thing to say? No. Fokion, allow me to add something before you finish. I feel that one part of this conversation had to do with the size of the productivity of the businesses. I think that we should not label everything with the same label. There are small businesses that are very dynamic and have huge capabilities. And also there are big businesses that are trying to bend the rules in our country. You know that. So it's not just the size of the business. Mr. Karavias? What you said is very important and very correct. And let me underline and repeat what Mr. Milonas said, that there are Greek businesses that are very competitive and can compete in the world market with international great businesses. And this is a result of the 10-year-old crisis, because these businesses managed to survive this decade. Now, let me say that we have an excellent time period that consists of three prongs. That this monetary policy that we are living right now is the most lax that we have experienced. We have zero cost of money right now, which will be continued for many years. Second factor is that regarding the capitals, when we lived through this decade of crisis, right now we have the capability to have more capitals than the capitals that we are able to utilize. So we have no capital problem, we have no cash flow problem, but we have a problem in finding the correct projects in order to absorb this capital. And the third thing is that there is a policy, a will, there is a strong will, but also the social will for many different things and many changes to appear in order to bring the country in a good position in the world market. We talked about the speed and the efficiency of the judicial system, the taxing system, and anyway, I think that I'm optimistic for the future.
Mr. Pitsilis, you have the floor on the condition that you will not kill our optimism. No, I will not do that. I told you that I do not aim to destroy your optimism. Let me only point out that normalcy, this normalcy depends on the efficiency, the effectiveness of the vaccine within its form and time. The faster vaccination takes place and the more effective the vaccine is, the faster this normalcy will come back. So, from our point, in action, the conference that we've had to do, holding the European fiscal management chairmanship in roads that we had last year and we didn't do, we will do. The only thing that blurs my image is the joke that the manager referred to, and which I wouldn't like to think about and saying that we were so well with the mask last year. I would like to thank you all, unless you have something to add, which does not seem to be the case. Thank you very much for your time and thoughts. I believe that conditional optimism is enough, and it is clear that it's not the end of the world. And on the other hand, we can see that there are things to be done, innovative things that gives us an edge compared to other European dynamic economies, which we have to perform, changes that we have to perform in order to protect ourselves by any potential unpleasant events. But we are a few days just before Christmas, so Merry Christmas to all of us and all of you who are listening to us. And I have the impression that for all of you, from the positions that you hold, the next months, the months to come, are very important. Let's see whether it's going to be the initiation of a very good start for the Greek economy. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Goodbye. Merry Christmas, everyone. Let's have safe and Merry Christmas.